always want people to understand the relationships that you have are created by the way you communicate. And so my argument here would be, if you really want to connect, the best thing you can do is not develop scripts, but develop skills. Most of the problem currently is people think that communication is a mode of transmission. And actually, our field now for the last 25 years has documented that communication is a constitutive process. And that's why I keep using the word create. When you communicate, you are creating your relationships.
Hello guys, Michael here. I'm here with Julien Mirivel, professor and doctor from the University of Arkansas. And he has been publishing a lot of scientific research papers in very prestigious journals. He has been publishing a lot of different books, and the latest book he did was specifically made for relationship building. And that book called Positive Communication with your co-worker, Alexander Lyon. Today we are going to talk about 4 things that I believe going to give you a massive value today. And first, welcome back, Julien.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm glad to be here and glad to talk with you more about communication and how important it is in our lives. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the reaction I got from our last podcast has been amazing. It really shows that people are craving for legitimate information when it comes to the world of how to build relationships. There's been so many things that goes against the science. That has been sort of destructive instead of being constructive when it comes to building a relationship with others, and especially with women that we want to form a relationship with, those that we find attractive, so on. So let's go straight into the first question, the first area that so many guys really want to know. So, Julien, the dating world is just full with pickup artist scripts and routines. Mm-hmm. And I guess that is the same thing for the sales department. I mean, they're so full of scripts and routines, and many salespeople, as well as guys that want to date women and so on, they think that they need a very instrumental system in order to succeed in a way without actually building connections. While from a scientific lens, we can see that connection is like the foundation before other things happen. So the question I hear is actually, why is the numbers game? And when I say numbers game, it's like, if I want to attract women and start dating women, I will just use a specific script and go and talk with a lot of women and see if something stick. The same goes with the sales guy who want to make a sale, and he just have a specific script that he just going to cold read for potential clients of the clients of the clients and start performing. And eventually, obviously, it's better than doing nothing, and he becomes successful. but why? Because I'm a strong believer that this is actually something that is a barrier. So why is the numbers game or performing actually a barrier to real connection rather than a path to it?
Yeah. So as always, I always want to tell people I'm a communication professor. So my expertise is not in kind of the pickup artist sphere, but I do think, so here's what I think about the question. You talked about the script, right? And I think it's very important for people to realize that in the world of relationships, which are primarily created by how and what we say and how we say it and what we do. Okay. So always want people to understand the relationships that you have are created by the way you communicate. Those two things are completely intertwined. So there's a big distinction. The distinction we need to make is between script versus skills. You should develop your skills. That makes sense because there's a variety of them that you can actually develop and grow and master. So in my model of positive communication, I focus on greeting, or this ability to initiate connection. I focus on asking questions. I focus on complimenting. Okay. So I've got these behaviors. Those are skills. Scripts, when people prepare a script, what they end up doing is preparing exactly what they're going to say and do. And the danger with that is then you become locked into that move. And of course, people are unique and they're complex, right? My favorite mentor in college taught us this is the most appropriate way of describing a person is complex. And so because they're complex, because communication is complex, if you get locked in a script, you're only going to increase your anxiety when the other person is not following that script with you. Does that make sense? You're betting on a prediction that really what you need to do is become even more flexible. So the best communicators are not scripting interaction. They are flexible with the skill that they are trying to master. So I'll try to give you an example that's maybe a little outside, right? So I may plan to greet. That's okay, but that's not a script. I'm going to initiate the connection. And then the more information and resources I have, the more flexibility I have about the choices that I make. So if all I know is to say, hi, my name is Julien, move number one, and that's my script, well, that may not be appropriate. If I'm meeting somebody from, say, India, I may want to just start with namaskar or namaste, right? That's a second option. If I meet somebody from, say, Saudi Arabia, I may start with assalamu alaikum. If I meet somebody from China, I may start with ni hao. So my skill is actually grounded in some capacity to be flexible. You see, as a communicator, I don't have just one way of greeting. I have lots of ways of greeting. And so my argument here would be, if you really want to connect, the best thing you can do is not develop scripts, but develop skills. And those skills that you develop should teach you lots of different ways. So then when the situation comes, you have lots of flexibility. Am I making sense, Michael, here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So something that I have been emphasizing on this channel a lot and my teaching is that we need to be cognitive flexible. And there are things that doesn't require, like the brain to be cognitive flexible, meaning that you have a serious behaviors that comes automatically. And when they come automatically without you even thinking, you become like this flexible, like your brain is cognitive flexible. And therefore you can listen and you can build something based on what you hear, based on your ability to ask questions, based on your ability to make it collaborative, based on the ability to make the other person feel heard, seen, valued, and so on. All those are based on automated processes in terms of specific behaviors, I believe. And would you say then also, like, when, for example, like if someone which is very, very grounded scientifically, your model of the 7 behaviors is 7, right? And would you say, like, once people actually master all those 7 behaviors, you more or less can say that now that person, if he know every single behavior completely automatic, he don't even need to think, he just comes up as he is as a person. Would you say that now he became more or less cognitive flexible? And but here comes also the thing, in order for him to actually know every single behavior automatically, he needs to go out and use it in order it to become automatically. So it goes like hand in hand, I guess.
Absolutely. And we talked about this last time, right? So there's thinking and there's doing. Those two things are very different. So you can think your way through communication, but that's not enough, because in the world of relationships, it is what you do. It is what you say and do that creates relationships, right? And the experience of those relationships. So my goal with the behaviors is to give people a compass. There are not laws of behavior. There are guides for action. And the difference between a script and a skill, again, is that a script, you're following a recipe. And suddenly, if the recipe is not working, then it's normal. It can only create some anxiety where you're like, well, I'm following the recipe and it's not working. So instead, I think it's better to have intentions. The other thing I wanted to say about the script that I think is important to think about is that when you use a script, you're already treating the other person as an object.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so what you want to do is think about your intention, and you can work on those skills, or you can work on the skill of, say, initiating contact. And maybe you practice 10 different ways. hi, I'm Julian, how are you? Or, oh, namaste, it's nice to meet you. So you can practice all of those ways and and then see what happens, but you're building your capacity for complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And you can
Okay.
imagine how many guys that use your example, like they learn this script and they talk to that woman that sort of feel like in the vibe at that moment because it's pretty entertaining or amusing, perhaps, but it's just because it is based on that script. And what
Yes.
happens when a situation, just occur where there is no script? And
Mm-hmm.
that guy is just going to fall apart, like you're going to crash like a card house. So that's a good example on exactly what you mentioned here in this at your example here at this point. um
Yeah, I may. Do you mind, Michael? I can give you one more
yeah,
example
go
with
ahead, give.
questions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in my model, I focus on the art of asking open-ended questions, and the
Mm-hmm.
reason I focus so much on that is because an open-ended question, by design, is going to liberate the floor, meaning it's going to give the other person the freedom to choose what to say. But the next question becomes, no pun intended, the next question becomes, well, what question should I use? Well, I think what you want to do is practice this idea of asking open ended questions. So if Michael tells me a little bit about his experience, I can say, well, tell me more about where you got this drive to do the work that you do today. I'm now just aligning with Michael's experience. I'm not, I've got the skill of doing an open-ended questions. I'm conscious of it. I'm intentional, and then I can bring it in. But the actual question, which would be a script, should change because each person is unique and different. And so it's your impulse to be curious that you want to cultivate.
So basically genuine curiosity is like the main fuel to actually be able to
Yes,
pull all this off.
absolutely. That would be my argument. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now with the second one, this one is a different kind of a so-called pickup artist myth, or just a myth in general, and that is the power of trying to impress. It's like
Uh-huh.
I I've achieved that much, so in some way you should value me more, and that
Mm.
value itself should build, like your like the person you're talking to should want to know me because I actually reach a certain level, or I earn a certain amount of money and so on. So that is probably something that you have been facing a lot in the area of communication. Like people think that in order to achieve a lot of things and brag about it is like a path to stardom in connection and relationships. What do you have to say about that?
So in the research, we call those affinity seeking strategies, and one of those strategies that people do use is they describe who they are in a positive way to try to impress other people. The the issue with that move is that it doesn't foster connection, right? So you can describe who you are in a positive way, and that may be helpful in some ways, and I certainly don't think people should describe themselves in negative ways, but there's a fine line, right? So if you kind of go overboard, suddenly people are like, well, this person is kind of thinking a little too highly of themselves. They can come off arrogant. So while they're promoting themselves, trying to impress, the end result that is given off as meaning is this person thinks way too highly of themselves. They don't have humility. So it's always a bit of a dangerous road to take when you move in that direction. I think you're better off complimenting the other person, because that is always going to be generally, when we research complimenting, it is always, I shouldn't say always, most of the time it is well received. They even do studies. Here's a study, Michael, where they tell people, I'm going to give you a compliment and I do not mean it at all. Okay. They say the compliment and people still love it. So even when we tell people, I don't mean it, the compliment still is effective. And I certainly would not advocate that people do that. I think the most meaningful compliments are going to be genuine, and they're going to be about the other person, and they're going to be in the interest of letting the other person know how we see them. But I think if you're moving in the road of trying to impress, that road again is very ego driven, and it's very we call it an I it relationship, right? I am an I, the other person is an object. And what you want to move to is what Buber, philosopher, long time ago said is an I-thou relationship. I'm
Mm.
honoring you. I'm approaching you in a genuine, authentic way because I want to connect with you as a person rather than as an object.
So it can actually be translated to like, even if you say that you achieved a lot of things, and even if you do it in a very smooth way, so it sounds like it's not intentional, but is there anyway. It's
Yeah.
like that. People would probably think like, wow, that guy have achieved a lot. That's pretty cool. But the
Yeah.
way they feel about that person is something else. You see what I mean? So thinking that
Absolutely.
someone is cool and achieve a lot of things, but how did that person make the person who listened to all that feel? Well,
Yeah.
according to the studies that I've seen and read, it's not much there.
No.
It's like okay, he's very good at basketball, fine, or he joined this team, or he had a company and he made millions. Okay, fine, but it's like good for him. And then how do I feel that listen and receive all that? Well, am I impressed? Maybe, but I have my own life to think about. I don't care so much more than okay, good for you, and that's it. Instead of someone actually, as you said, take an interest on me and then really, like lifting me up. Now I feel good, and that is
Yeah.
probably the foundation of relationship building for sure.
Yeah.
Also, a quick thing, guys, when we're talking about compliments, he's absolutely right. Compliments is very important, but there is one thing when it comes to the area of dating and attracting women, especially you as a man that want to attract women, is that there are some compliments the women are completely immune to, and that is to compliment them with their physical beauty. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have any relationship to who they are as a person. So this is more like of that I put as a standard of compliments is that if you
Mm-hmm.
give a compliment to a woman, it should definitely be based on context, something that she's
Yes.
done, something that she is as a person, something that you've seen in her that goes beyond the physical looks.
Yeah.
So the only compliment that I would advise guys not to give women in general like that is, oh, you're so beautiful, or your beautiful eyes, your so beautiful hair, and so on. That is the only thing that I feel like they've heard too many times, get immune to it, and it's actually more destructive than constructive because she can easily put you into a box that, oh, he only see me as an object, and then you're off as a pretty bad start actually. So that's the
Exactly.
only small thing I want to say.
Yeah, and I love what you said about like the context matters, right? The
Mm.
context, and the context includes the other person,
Yeah, yeah,
not just the situation, but it's the situation, it's the other person, it's their experiences, it's both what they like and they don't like. So it's that consideration that's going to help you communicate more effectively. Good communication is other oriented.
exactly. So basically, the connection, build the communication based on context of the other
Yes,
person to build
absolutely.
things. Yeah. So
Yes.
very, very good stuff, man. Very good. So let's go to the point number two, which
Okay.
my audience are craving for, and I try to explain to them based on my master knowledge in interpersonal communication and behavioral science. Um, Now we're talking about the concept of the scientifically or science foundation. So
Yes.
here's my take on it. People in general think that communication is just common sense, and I want you to explain the rigor behind relationship building theory through positive communication. How much data do we actually have proving that these specific behaviors actually work, like disclosure and warmth, as you really mentioned on the last podcast? Are they
Yeah.
actually the drivers of connection that also leads to attraction, if that is the case?
So, two things. So, I'll start
Mhm.
with addressing the first one. Communicating well is not common sense. As you can see, we're describing a lot of things that are not instinctive, that are not intuitive, and that actually contradict very often the way people think about communication. Um, Most of the problem currently is people think that communication is a mode of transmission. And actually, our field now for the last 25 years has documented that communication is a constitutive process. And that's why I keep using the word create. When you communicate, you are creating your relationships. In the same way that you have fingers, right, and hands, you can do this, but that doesn't mean you can play the piano beautifully. That those two things are unrelated. You have the capacity to learn, but just because you do a lot of talking doesn't mean that you communicate well. So my job is really trying to figure out what it looks like to communicate well. And to do that, we have now, I mean, the birth of the communication discipline is Aristotle, right? So it's great, ancient Greece, with first the development of the forms of persuasion. And then you've got the revolution in the scientific enterprise, in the 1900s. So for the last, say, 50, 60 years, researchers have been collecting data and developing theory around those behaviors in my model. And of course, I don't always, like, if I'm doing a talk like this one, I'm not going to be describing the theory that informs everything or the data that informs, but the models that I chose, the behaviors that I chose in my model are absolutely grounded in two things: theory, and very often years of research, not just by me, but by other researchers exploring that behavior. But doesn't mean it's finished. There's more research to be done, right? So take the behavior of disclosing or disclosure. In the 1970s, researchers began to explore the role of disclosing in relationships, romantic relationships in particular. The theory is called social penetration theory. What the theory essentially found through data analysis was that as a relationship progresses from being strangers, people don't know each other, to being together, the difference is their ability to disclose more and more intimate information about one another and to be curious about each other. So the big lesson of that theory was, when you disclose, right, you actually create the very intimacy that you experience with other people. So that is a flat fact. It's we're not inventing this. That is like what researchers have found when they begin to explore romantic relationships. Or take the behaviors of my model, brand new research article that came out in 2025. They studied it in the context of leadership. What do they find? They found that when leaders practice my behaviors, greeting, asking, complimenting, disclosing, encouraging, listening, and then together inspiring, that what happens is they affect this direct relationship between those behaviors and a leader's ability to create a positive emotional climate in an organization. And when they affect the emotional climate, it affects literally employee engagement. So I could go on, Michael. I mean, I'm sure you want to say something and can join this conversation, but I chose these behaviors because they were grounded in several things. One, my deep thinking about the topic. I've been studying communication now since I was 21 as an undergraduate student. Two, a body of work that has taken me through language and social interaction research, interpersonal communication research, etc. And then three, existing theories in our discipline. And it is a process. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying they should be used all the times. I'm thinking that there are guides for action. I'll pause here because I'm sure you want to get in, Michael.
No, it's amazing. I mean, this is what we want to hear. Absolutely. And I mean, I for my model that I'm using when I'm teaching guys how to build relationship with women, it's very, very similar to your model. Very similar. I do have one extra behavior, which is to emphasize that the other person really feels seen and heard. And I'm using a couple of tactical empathy tools in order to achieve that. Because many times when we are listening and we are communicating, we're not always doing it in the way that we're going to ensure that the other person understands that we understood them. And therefore, I do believe that reflective listening, in terms of maybe a paraphrase or something, could be extremely effective. Something like, if I see that someone has have started a new work and she is very happy about it, that she achieved to get that work, but there are some challenges in that work, so she now have a little bit of a second thoughts, but in the same way she really want to push through it. And then I would say, then I could come and say, like, it sounds like you have mixed feelings about your current situations, but in some way your motivation just push it through. Just saying that part, I do believe that I demonstrated understanding in the way that she might not have been, you might have not have got that message in the same way if I didn't say that paraphrase. What
Yeah,
do you think about
that's
that
a great
part?
I actually think, so that's part of in my, again, in my skill set,
Mm,
right? I focus on
yeah.
listening. And to me, that's an example of deeper listening. I call in the book,
Mm,
I call it deep listening. And it includes a number of other moves like what you're describing. So empathy, the ability to label the emotion of
mm,
another person's experiences. And those things can really validate another person's experience, right? So if you make a move, like even in a positive way, like I was having this interaction with my good friend Alex, whom you
mm.
know, and I was telling him this story. And I'm like, oh, this is what's happening. And I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And my voice is clearly excited. And at some point, he says, Julien, it sounds like you're really excited about this. And I said, yes, I am. So you feel validated because the other person is like listening to you and they're labeling appropriately what you're feeling, which in my case was excitement. So even when it's a positive emotion, it communicates to the other person. When Alex makes that move, it communicates to me, oh man, he's listening to me. He got it. He understands it. He understands me. And that just keeps on growing then my connection with my friend.
Oh, absolutely. Great example. But the same goes if you predict wrong, and then the other person have to correct you. And then after that
Yeah.
person correct you, so like, okay, now I get it. You
Yeah.
always achieve the same thing. It's like, wow, this guy really want to, he really want to know. Like he's he's genuinely interested. So it's just a positive outcome, basically. Even if you got it right or got it wrong, it's still very good often.
It's still a very good move. Yeah, it's a move that you can't really lose on. It's a win-win. No matter, I mean, if you do it well, it's a win-win in terms of what happens for both you and the recipient, and then ultimately, in the connection process.
So just to wrap up the section number 2 here, which is actually a huge thing. So what I want to emphasize here with you, Julian, is like there are behaviors that are scientifically proven and have become a scientific principle of as they can be used as a compass and as a guide for us to actually bridge that principle into real world scenarios practically. Uh,
Right.
what
And
we
I'm
are
glad you're
talking about,
using the word principle. So I think it's a
yeah.
good way for people of thinking about it, that the skill set that I have, if you look at the model that I have, are connected to principles. Always want to tell people, don't interpret that as a script move, right? That's how we started the conversation.
Mm-mm.
Interpret that as a skill that you can develop with practice and ultimately with flexibility, and your skill set should expand. Instead of having one option, hopefully you have 10 or 12 or 15. And the stronger your communication skills, the more options you have to solve complex problems.
Absolutely. And also, this is what the real science have been, researched over and over and over again. This is like
Mm-hmm.
the real data we're working with here. Uh,
Absolutely.
there are other things, especially more to my knowledge about the pickup artist industry and so on. A lot of things are not rooted in science. And I believe many times that people have to be very careful of trying to spend a lot of money, trying to, in some way, get the habit of doing things that is not scientifically proven and researched and doesn't
Absolutely.
have the scientific principles. And it can really backfire because then suddenly you have to unlearn certain skills, unlearn certain behaviors, which is very difficult to do sometimes in order to learn like the real approach of doing things. And the real approach, according to what I believe, and probably according to what you believe, are things that are properly researched and the right research method have been done and so on. So we really have the base of like, okay, we can see a pattern here and let's build on that. And that is what we're talking
Yeah.
about when we talk about the the scientific foundation of relationship building theory. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of I'll give you one last example. A lot of
Mhm.
the behaviors that I've created in the model, part of the surprise, to be honest, is that as research continues to evolve, I developed the model more than 10 years ago now. So more research is coming that is then supporting the framework that I've developed. Here's a study that Alex and I used in a training recently on leadership. People study effectiveness of teams, right? And they rank them low performing team, medium performing team, high performing team. What's the difference between what goes on when these teams meet together? Here's what they found. In the low performing team, people make more negative comments than positive comments. In the highest quality team, what do? They have a ratio of almost 6. It's 5.8. So almost 6 times more positive comments than negative comments. So that means people are like doing things like what we're describing. And the second thing they found that as you move from low performing team to medium performing team to high performing teams, their ratio from just expressing or advocating for their views versus asking questions went up. And what that means is that early on, low performing team spend their whole time just telling other people what they think. But when you go to high performance team, you know what they do? They ask more questions than they make statements. I think those two principles you can apply to romantic relationships. Absolutely. In a romantic relationship, John Gottman found that successful romantic partners have a 5-to-1 ratio, 5 positive acts for every 1 negative act. Okay. So all I'm trying to describe here, I hope this is helpful, Michael, but this is data supported skills that you can work on and develop, and you'll see tangible results in who you are and in your relationships. Absolutely.
Wow, amazing. So guys, a quick comment here. what I can say is like, it is sort of a team. They're just going to, say what they think all the time, using a type of communication skills that doesn't have the component of building connection. It's like there's nothing there much. While the high performing team put a lot of connection based elements in their conversations, and therefore they become really a lot better because the understanding is a completely different level. People feel good with each other in a completely different level, and that is what actually drives those teams to a much better both efficiency and effectiveness compared with other teams, I guess. So
absolutely.
So here's the quick one. There's this section number the third point that we want to talk about, which is pretty short actually, but a lot of my audience are wondering about this one. Okay. We as humans all over the world, we spend years learning math, learning history, but almost zero time on how to build a high quality relationship through communication and conversations. So why do you think the society has treated social competence, meaning basically positive communication, interpersonal communication, listening skills, and so on, as something super extra and a niche segment of the society instead of a core human survival skill?
I'm not sure. I don't know that I can answer the why question, although I think you're experiencing a shift, and you're part of a shift where communication has earned its place among at least the social sciences and the humanities for sure. So think about it this way. When I first was when I lived in France, so I was born and raised in France and Switzerland in Europe. If I wanted to study communication, which is what I do today, there's nowhere I could have gone at the time. In the United States, the National Communication Association was founded in the 1900s, where it became formally a study, right? And now you can go to almost any university in the United States and abroad, and people can learn communication skills. So I think part of it is we are realizing how important, some of it is we just didn't know, but we are realizing how important communication skills are for people professionally and for people personally. And for their family life, right? We know also, I mean, we haven't talked about this today, but I can give you study after study that shows how important communication skills are for having a happy, healthy family with the people you love and care about. So I do think it's been labeled as a soft skill, but I don't view it negatively. Like I just read a book I'm looking to see if I have it here, by Daniel Coyle. He wrote a book called The Culture Code, and he's got a brand new one called Flourishing. It just came out 2 weeks ago. And he wrote a little book called The Little Book of Talent. And in it, he just explains hard skills versus soft skills. And in hard skills, he says, think of it like, that skill set is very technical. Like, let's say I want to learn how to play tennis. Well, I'm learning to do a forehand. A forehand is a forehand. I have to bend my knees. I have to strike the ball. That's going to have a hard skill. Soft skill, the way he described it, which I found interesting, was they require ambiguity and complexity.
Mm.
And that's how we started our conversation, Michael, meaning a script is great, but in the world of relationships, that's not that helpful because what you want are skills. So I think we're getting better at teaching them, and hopefully, we can keep on developing them. So I think we have ignored them, but we are as a society, like, think even about your podcast, how much time you spend thinking and talking about communication skills, right? So there's growing realization that if we can improve our communication, we will be able to improve our relationships. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, yeah. I think yeah, absolutely. I guess that is like how it goes because I feel a little bit like this. It's not until like the last couple of years maybe where this whole new area of communication actually comes up to the surface. And
Yep.
then now, I'm now talking about the area of interpersonal communication. Okay,
Sure.
interpersonal communication is very is quite broad.
Broad.
So let's specify it into relationship building communication
Yep.
um, towards real world scenarios for normal people. And I
Yeah.
haven't seen that until maybe let's say 2 3 years ago. That's it
Mm-hmm.
basically. And if someone want to learn this skill set and understand that, oh, listening skills is actually something that is so fundamental that maybe this is like one of the biggest compasses to have when you want to make the biggest positive influence towards another person, to listen to them. This is not a common skill. This is
Yeah.
really not. So the whole realm of the communication faculty, interpersonal communication is just part of it that hasn't really been
It's just part of
explored.
it.
They
Yeah.
think
It's more
most people
recent.
think, yeah, most people thinking about rhetoric, they think about public speaking and so on.
Yep.
But that is vastly different from connection-based conversations.
Absolutely.
And I believe
Absolutely.
that, and then people that listen to us now, they can be really, very analytical men that has been, have very, very impressive credentials on various fields, and they are completely clueless into this in this area, completely clueless. They never heard anything about it. They always, most of the people, I would say like 90% of everyone that comes to me for coaching, they believe that storytelling is the thing. Like I have to learn how to tell interesting and good stories. That is the foundation for me to be successful.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Uh, as soon as I talk to them about make it about the other person, it becomes like an epiphany moment. Like, oh my God, I never thought about that. I
Yeah.
no, and those people are high profile people, and we can. I mean, I can name a couple of them. Just by the rank, it's like someone were like the main city planner of San Francisco, San Jose. Another
Yeah.
person was one of the biggest real estate agents in Florida. Another one has started a high tech firm that is now worth like billion of dollars. You
Yeah.
see, those people you think should know this because they are really aware about the environment and so on, and yet they're not aware about this particular part. It is crazy,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, and I do think that's part of what makes communication skills so difficult is that we are sometimes unconscious of our incompetence, right? And I spend a lot of time thinking about communication. And I'm telling you, one of the key things that I try to accomplish, which is kind of what you're related to what you're
Mm,
doing, is change people's thinking just even about what communication is.
mm,
So if you move from transmission, which is what the person is saying, right? If I could just learn to tell the right story, then I'm going to win. Well, sometimes that works. Sometimes a good story does work in public speaking. It's very effective. But in the world of relationship, you have to move from transmission to creation. What am I creating with my audience? What am I creating with this other person? And that's a shift. That's a shift in consciousness, a shift in thinking that we see and that people need to make. So yeah, absolutely, I can see that.
yeah. So hopefully, no, I can see that even though people don't learn the full scale of it, it's like a lot of organizations and different practices, they're actually taking fragments of interpersonal communication and integrate that into the program. You see,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
have an MBA, for example, MBA, and in that MBA program has nothing to do with communication basically, but in that program they integrated parts of interpersonal communication in certain areas, such as
Sure.
negotiation and so on. So people start doing that more actually to actually adapt it into their own system, and that leads to the point number four, and that is being confident of doing all this. So many of my clients, they're coming to me and they really want to learn this, but they don't want to read books after books after books after books in order
Sure.
to understand, a 3,000 pages theory about the foundation of scientific principles of relationship building theory. And then now
Sure.
they're going to go to the next step and doing it practically. So
Sure.
most guys, they are busy. They are, I mean, they have their own lives. They're doing all, various of stuff in their life, but they haven't got this one sorted out yet. And they
Yeah.
just want to have something that they feel like I can use it almost directly, and I can use it so I can create this micro habituation day by day until I become proficient in conversations based on the real thing, that the real scientific principles as a guideline. And now I'm practicing, methods based on that. What should they do? I mean, that type, except of personal coaching, what should they do here? What should they do? I mean, there is
I mean,
not
we've
so
given
much
them a lot
available.
today, right?
Yeah, we,
I mean,
we
I
have,
think
we
if you're
have.
watching this podcast, you already have a lot of ideas, and I get it. You don't have time to go, become a researcher in communication skills. That's just not what you can do. And that's part of the reason why I developed the model that I'm sharing with everybody. Is that's a simple thing. It's got 6 behaviors and a seventh one, if you really think about it. But it's designed to be simple and to think of communication as a growing set of skills. Confidence is a funny thing because I believe it's not that I believe in it less and less. It's that to me, I think this is what we talked about last time. Your stronger bet is going to be to work on your self efficacy, which is your belief, the belief that you have that you can do the skill that you're trying to do. And the only way to build them is to do it. You can't think your way through it, as I think you'd like to say, Michael, right?
Mm.
Thinking is great, but in the world of relationships, I would even say that feeling is great, but feelings and things it has access. What they will know is what you say and do, and that's ultimately what shapes those relationships. So I think that it's people think about it the wrong way. They're like, okay, first I'm going to build my confidence, and then I'm going to do this. That's not how that works. It's the opposite. Is you practice behaviors, and those behaviors become integrated, and so you build your confidence in your ability to do it, and that's how you build self-efficacy. So I don't know if that helps you, Michael, but I do think it's investment in doing, but being guided a little bit. And that's why we talked a little bit about intention. Like, remember, your intention is to connect. Your intention is to get to know this other person. Your intention is to be present and to do everything you can to be present. And when you do these skills, you practice these skills, they become more and more part of you, but it has to be, in my mind, it has to be intentional.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And also, it's so amazing to hear you say that, because you coming from the perspective that you are, teaching world leaders, business leaders, and so on, to use those models that you have come up with, these behaviors. And because
Yeah.
they are really like scientifically grounded, very, very strong, scientifically grounded, with rigorous research all the way up till now, since 50, 60 years back till now. For my field, though, people have done the same without the scientific principle, without the research.
Uh-huh.
So they actually practice, different theories that don't have any scientific backing at all, and they experience
Sure.
a lot of negative reinforcement, meaning that the reactions is not what is they are supposed to be if you're doing something
Yeah, that would decrease
that
your
doesn't work.
confidence.
So
Yeah.
that instead backfired, and then suddenly people really they really went under to the bottom. So it's very important to emphasize here that if you're going to go through the whole step of rigorously applying the right behaviors into your new day by day life, make sure that it is based on the science, like there is a scientific groundwork before you
Yeah.
use them as a compass. I think that's
Can I
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
can I give you one example of this is
Mhm.
one of my favorite research studies. It was done
Yeah.
by Dan Chambliss. He's a professor of sociology, and he followed, like, we're in the Olympics time, right? So Olympics is going on right now. He
Mm-mm.
followed Olympic swimmers, but he started with young kids super early, and he followed them, and then he followed people who were older, and then he moved on. So from the whole realm of people who are just learning how to swim for the first time to like highest level Olympic swimmers. And the big question was, how do people move from learning how to swim to becoming like one of the best in the world? So Dane Chambliss did this study of Olympic swimmers, but he really started with people very early on, like who were just barely learning how to swim, 10, 9 years old. And it was a large scale study where he really followed these people in depth to understand how do people make real improvement and move from being a beginner to being a true expert, okay, at the highest level. And the first argument, which I think is really important for what we're talking about today, is this: you do not get better by doing more of it. Of course, you have to practice those skills, but if you just do more and more and more and more and more of the same skills, you are not improving. In order to improve, you have to do what he called, you have to make a qualitative change. You have to change the way you are doing it. And I think what we try to do in the podcast today with you, Michael, and part of what you try to teach, you're trying to teach people to make a qualitative change. Rather than treating a person as an object, treat them as another person to discover. Rather than, tell them a story about how awesome you are, ask some questions you can get to know them. And guaranteed you're going to get different results because you have made a qualitative change in what you're doing.
Absolutely. So a quick quote to that I used to tell all my viewers, audience, clients, all of them is that if you want to be good at this, really, really good,
Uh-huh.
it's not only about being yourself. You have to be more yourself than ever before. That's what it is.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be more yourself than you
I like it.
ever been before. So that is something that I feel is really, really important. And now I have like the last questions that I want you to answer in only 2 sentences. All right.
Okay.
And here comes the question. If an analytical man wants to start building real competence today, what is the one behavioral shift he can make to stop being in his head and start being in the room?
I think the best shift you can make, I mean, out of all of my behaviors, the one I would fundamentally practice is asking open-ended questions.
All
Because
right.
if you do, you will notice that the interaction will change immediately. It's right there. So if you ask somebody, what do you really love to do in your spare time? Or what are your favorite hobbies? You're going to become present immediately because you're interested in them, and they're going to be present too. So that would be my recommendation to start.
A game changer. All right, Julian, thank you so much for being here today. And we are looking forward to speak more to you in the future if that situation comes up. So
Absolutely.
have a great
Thanks,
day,
Michael, for
Julian.
having me, and best wishes to all of you.
Right. Thanks. Bye.